Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Winback, and on today's episode of RPG Radio, we are going to play a light frame quadruped AC in Armored Core 6. This build comes equipped with all of the advantages of a light AC and the weight limit of quad legs, which is fantastic because some of the equipment for this build does have a little bit of a weight limit, and that is pretty easily circumvented with the quadruped legs. It also just so happens that most of the weapons in this build couple very well with the body parts for a very sleek and slender look. So if you're in the market for a quadrupedal build that is also a lightweight AC with a good variety of weaponry, you are in the right place. This build guide is for you. Now, that being said, it is not without its drawbacks, so we'll talk about those too, but let's kick this off with the body parts and the frame of the AC, because there are a couple of those that are going to be very important in keeping our load down, our weight down, and making sure that our quads don't have to do more work than they really need to. Now, when it comes to the tetrapod legs, you get two choices, and ours is the VP424. The other option is the Viral, and there is either the Archivist legs, which are the 424, or the Balaam legs, and that's the Viral. That's the one that G1 Michigan uses in his mission for his AC, but we're not doing that. We're going for lightweight and fast, and that is ultimately the whole reason that anybody is going to play anything lightweight. So with the tetrapod legs, the VP424, you actually get a pretty decent load limit on top of the mobility of light legs and some of the perks of the quadruped legs, which is really just, it's kind of sad that there's only two to pick from. Hopefully some DLC down the way will unlock more options for both the tank legs and the quadruped legs, because right now the market is pretty slim. But let's talk a little bit about what these legs are good for. Ultimately, you are going to be able to use them to not only increase your loadout in terms of weapons and the weight of weapons that you can use along with your generator, but you also get access to the nifty flight mode that comes along with tetrapod legs, in that you can tap your jump button again when you are in the air to hover. And when you're hovering, that means that your AC is going to sit in basically a tank position while still movable, still able to quick boost, and it is going to be able to launch heavier weapons without suffering from your typical recoil stun stance. If you've ever played with a bipedal mech, whether it's heavy or light or anything that sits on the ground that's not tank legs, you know that you have to sit still, let that weapon fire, and then you can go back to what you're doing. It is incredibly frustrating if you are trying to get in a clutch shot before something attacks you, but when you are using these tetrapod legs and you are in that flight mode, you get a very substantial reduction. Actually, it's not even substantial. It's just a complete reduction of recoil for those heavy weapons, making them very usable in the air. You'll actually get to see how effective these legs are in boss fights later on in this video, because there are a couple boss fights in particular that make a very good use of the hover for these legs. Because you can stay above most of the bosses for prolonged periods of time, they're much easier to track, and it's a lot harder for them to dodge left and right because you have a better angle of attack with your ranged weapons. Now, the next portion of this build is going to be the Noctrier arms, which did make an appearance in the last video for our lightweight Gundam build. These are going to be a very strong option when you are building a ranged weapon focused lightweight build, because they have the highest firearm specialization in the entire game. What that means is that your reticle is going to have a much easier time staying on the target at medium to long range because of these arms. Now, couple that with your FCS, making sure that we have got the correct one for those ranges means that it's going to be very difficult for enemies to avoid getting blasted with our weapons from those ranges unless they specifically have a quick boost like some of the bosses or enemy ACs will. Just remember, it is easier to blast things with these arms as long as you're not trying to shoot something at them like a shovel or a sword. Yes, I understand the irony because you can clearly see the Moonlight on this build, but bear with me. The point still stands. Now, the VE20C generator does come with a caveat and a comparison because there were a lot of comments in the last video about how the energy firearm specialization stat should have been better managed for that build, but ultimately, you can see this build is going to run into the same problem that I had with that one that a lot of people didn't seem to catch. The 20C, the one that we've got equipped, has a higher energy capacity and lower energy firearm specialization. The 20B, which is its counterpart, has higher firearm specialization, energy firearm specialization, but it has a lower energy capacity, and the AC can't even launch if it doesn't have enough energy to power all of its systems. So, when you are looking at a generator, you can't just be looking at stats, make big gun do more damage. Your AC also has to have power, it has to be able to move, and if it's not hitting the energy capacity to do so, you can't even engage in the mission. And if your other argument is, well, why don't you change your weapons to compensate for your generator, then that's a whole nother discussion because I don't make these builds to be maximum efficiency. I make them to have fun, and I make them to play the game that I enjoy playing. So if you are the type of player who needs peak efficiency, maximum output, and optimal usage of all parts in unison at all times, then more power to you. You're the type of scientist that figures out how the game works and tells everyone else about it. That's lovely. I hope that you keep doing that, but I personally think that that sounds incredibly boring, and I play this game to come up with new builds, to experience it in all sorts of different ways. That is one of the pinnacles of what it means to be a mech game, in my humble opinion, and I'm just going to keep running it down the way that I do. So that's enough of a rant tangent combo for you. I promise we're getting back to the build now. Let's look at the heart and soul of any AC build, the boosters. Those things that you use to get around instead of using your big clunky feet. Even though we've got 4 of them, the G2 PO4 boosters are still completely necessary for getting around, and their stats are very much a B student, B plus student, if we're being perfectly honest. These boosters actually have well, we won't say very good, but they have good quick boost energy consumption, meaning that you can boost more often without completely deleting your energy capacity, and they come with some pretty strong assault boost. I almost said attack boost. Assault boost energy consumption as well. Because of that, these boosters are going to allow us to quick boost for longer without burning out our energy bar much faster than normal. They also have a pretty decent energy load, and since we're using a light mech and a basically borderline energy capacity generator, that energy load is going to be better for us when it's lower. I'm sure I don't need to explain it again, but there it is. These aren't the boosters that are going to walk down the Hollywood red carpet. They're not the ones that are going to impress your entire friends and family. These are the boosters that are going to put a ring on your finger, buy you a nice mid-sized sedan, and make sure that you never have to work again a day in your life. It's just not going to be super flashy. Now, there are 3 parts to this build that I don't think are 100% necessary. Ultimately, the reason that I chose these 3 specific parts is because they filled in an easily fillable role, or they had a very specific look that I was going for when it comes to the aesthetics of the build. Number 1 is going to be the head. That is your Mind Alpha. Mind Alpha is a really cool looking head part that you can unlock through the log hunt program, and the energy load isn't, super high. It's actually pretty low considering, so it really helps with the generator capacity and making sure we're getting maximum usage out of that. Next up on this moderately important list of parts is going to be your core, which is the ephemera. This core part, to be honest with you, I could not find a build that I liked its look in for a very long time, and the fact that it fits in this one so nicely is the entire reason I picked it. That being said, it does have one stat that is pretty helpful when it comes to builds that use very power-hungry parts, and that is going to be your generator output adjustment stat. That stat specifically is going to let you increase your energy load. So it's energy output for your AC. So the higher that the output is, the more things that you can put on your mech that require more energy. So if you've got a big honking laser gun you want to use, but your EN load is being overridden because of that, you can find a core with a big generator output adjustment, and that will increase your energy output so that you can put on that bigger part. It's really nifty the way that it works, but it's not a stat that I usually find myself worrying about too often. And lastly is the FCS. I am using the Talbot for this build because it has decent close range and medium range values for locking onto targets. The long range is totally terrible, but really we're not using a whole lot of long range in this build. Medium is what we're usually sticking to. That being said, the Talbot can obviously be replaced if you are trying to play further away, but because of the Moonlight, because of how I do want to spend some time up in the faces of enemies, I went with some that had a little bit of close range assistance to it. I did just want to let that cinematic play out because that's one of my favorite in the entire game. We don't see any of the special forces from the PCA really anywhere else in the game. Any of the missions, none of them really incorporate these mechs, which is super sad because they're so cool looking, and the fact that there's two of them and they do all these different things together, it's such a cool fight, and they're such cool enemies, and I really don't think that they get enough attention. I would love to play as one of those mechs, or at least get the parts that they have, because they are fantastically designed. It's just so cool. But that, another tangent aside, let's get back to what everybody's really interested in here, the weapons, the gear, the loadout, on top of all those pretty body parts, and let's talk first about the one weapon that I'm sure is a little bit out of place. Now, you may have noticed that this build, like I said, it's very sleek, it's very slender, it's very energy based. There are a lot of weapons on it that just have this curve to them in both their damage and their look. But there is one weapon, mainly our left-hand weapon, that is just full explosion, full collateral damage, and does not care at all about looking pretty. The Javelin Alpha is one of the lighter weight grenade launchers with a very low reload time comparatively, at least when we're talking about grenade launchers, and it does come with a very simple role in this build. That role being doing as much stagger damage as possible in a small amount of time from range if need be. The grenade launchers, obviously of all kinds, are very good at building that stagger bar, and this one is no exception, other than the fact that you hold it in your hand rather than you stick it on your shoulder. Now, the blast radius on this weapon is not as big as some of its contemporaries, so remember, you're not going to be pulling off huge explosions and taking out tons of smaller MTs like you would with the earshots or the songbirds, but when you are faced with a one-on-one target, or even 1 to 2 bigger targets, this boy has a low enough cooldown and a big enough stagger, or a big enough impact damage, that you will knock people on their butts very quickly. The VE66 LRA is the next weapon in our repertoire though, and this laser rifle is without a doubt one of the coolest looking in the entire game, and I will go ahead and venture it is probably what should have been the successor to the Karasawa from previous iterations of Armored Core, but I think the rifle that we got that actually replaces that is it's the KRSV rifle, which is a combination like pulse and laser rifle, which is still really cool, and I do have a build planned specifically for that weapon later on. But as far as silhouettes go, this one is just, it nails it as far as looking like the Kurosawa from Armored Core 3 and, you know, the previous generations of the series. That being said, this weapon maximizes the use of your energy firearm specialization on our core, and we can basically one-shot most MTs in the game with this rifle. It is incredibly useful for clearing out trash, for landing big damage consistently, because it is just, it's very, very good, especially at medium range. And if Iguazu would stop going up and down in between the middle floor on this arena, we might actually be able to hit him a few times, but he's being such a... well, he's just being extra squirrely for some reason, instead of being the normal fighty, run him down kind of fight that I was used to with all the other builds. That being said, it's whatever. I'll get him eventually. He's only got 2 health left, but look at that. He's such a joke. I'm sure. Well, anyway, spoilers aside, this character is... you'll find out when you finish your 3rd playthrough. But anyway, that being said, Iguazu down gets a grenade to the face, so we can start talking more about our shoulder-mounted weapons, and namely, we're going to start with the laser cannon. Did I say laser cannon? The Fasan 60E is actually a plasma cannon, and there is a difference, if you can believe that. The plasma cannon is not only going to shoot purple beams of energy, but it comes with the chargeable mechanic as well, and when plasma hits a target, is actually going to leave a blast radius and some lingering damage. I disagree that that beam hit me, but I got to dodge the next one, even though I ate a bunch of missiles for breakfast too. It's okay. The Enforcer is kind of a, he's not a good guy. But the Fazan, the plasma cannon, is very, very useful in the amount of damage it can do, and when you make a direct hit on an enemy, this bad boy will actually do some lingering damage too. So if you have got an enemy that is very close to either dead or staggered, sometimes the blast radius of the plasma cannon itself will continue to deal damage and send them over the edge into staggered or dead. And that is worth its weight in gold, I believe. And last but certainly not least is the Moonlight, the From Software Hall of Fame blade weapon, light wave blade to be specific for Armored Core 6, rounding out the weapons for this build. If you're not familiar with the Moonlight, this blade is going to do something... well, it's not typical of a sword, and that is the ranged attack that comes with the weapon. It actually will fire off a light wave, just like the name says, and that will go a specific range to hit the target that you're aiming at. You can follow it up again with a second attack, and you will fling another blade in a cool, super cool, edgy X pattern. It is actually really cool to look at. I love the color of the blade as well, and it hits a very big area. You'd be surprised. You can also charge the Moonlight, which isn't something I find myself doing very often, but when you do that, you do a big horizontal slash that will cover a huge area and deal enough damage to usually wipe out some pretty big trash mobs. It is unbelievably cool. Not only is the Moonlight very famous in the FromSoft world, it is just a mainstay of the Armored Core series as well. So if you ever played, 2 or 3 or anything up until this point, you've probably seen a Moonlight before, and they are always very, very cool weapons. But that's really about it for the weaponry. I mean, it's all very self-explanatory, and you'll just find out how well it works when you use it. And I can't really offer anything else up that isn't on full display in this video. But true to form, we're trying to end the video against a boss that is going to just be very difficult to deal with our build. The Enforcer is a very big, very mobile, and very shielded guy who does not like to put his shield down or stop boosting when you are at range. He does have a whole lot of melee range weaponry too, to just shut us down with our tiny little light boy health bar, and that makes things incredibly difficult. Unfortunately, the shield on the Enforcer cancels out a lot of the effectiveness of our energy weaponry, so getting up close, making sure he gets hit a lot with our grenade launcher and our Moonlight to build that stagger bar up when we have the opportunity is very important. Not only that, but this boss does have a couple kind of cheesy tactics to go on top of everything else. His pulse weapon is incredibly difficult to dodge. He gets his opening laser fire on you as soon as you enter the boss room, and the timing on the dodge is incredibly necessary for avoiding a lot of damage, because as a light mech, our AP is at a premium. The good news though is that he is consistently grounded. He is not going to do any flying whatsoever, meaning that you do not have to aim over your head like you would with a sea spider or an air or anything else that just has big boosters and likes to go full aerial, which is why the quad or the tetrapod legs are going to be very useful against this boss. Now, you're not seeing it right away because it took me 2 tries to just figure out how I'm supposed to deal with this gigantic goober and his energy shield, but it turns out being above him is super useful. Dodging that first laser, getting in close, but then going above is how you are going to unload most of your damage. Dodging in to get away from the missiles because he just continually fires them off. Taking a whole bunch of lasers and melees to the face isn't a good idea though, so make sure to heal through those if you are as lazy as I am and just like to eat the lasers for lunch. Then get back in your aggressive stance and show the Enforcer that you do not have the patience for his transformer shenanigans, his pulse weaponry, or his constant missile barrages. Wow, you never know how annoying missiles are until you really just have to stand there and get hit by all of them. Yet again though, he's being forced to commit to a hide beneath us kind of fighting style, and his melee isn't going to do anything on us whatsoever. So the stagger is big, the stagger is easy, and we can whip out a full rotation of all of our weapons while he charges up a big shockwave that is in no way, shape, or form ever going to hit us. That is yet another brilliant part of this fight, because your tetrapod legs will never let you get hit by anything as blatantly obvious as a big melee shockwave on any enemy. Just hit the jump button, hit that fancy jump button again, go in for the kick and the assault boost, and make sure that that big, angry, Optimus Prime looking monkey knows who's boss. Optimus Primal, if you will. Beast Wars, anybody? Anyway, that is it for me, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out for another Armored Core 6 build. This has been fantastic amounts of fun, and I hope you all enjoyed it if you decided to play it yourselves. That is it though. Peace out. I'll see you next time.